Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Welcome to our report for FrankCon 2023. This is our local convention that we run here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I'm excited to share all of the different games that we played and as well as give some of our awards from our Franklin committee. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's talk about the games that we played at FrankCon 2023. Now, before we get into this video, I want to quickly talk about two of our large events that we ran at FrankCon 2023, and those were our tournaments. So our first tournament that we ran was for the Unmatched board game. So this is a game that I fell in love with last summer and immediately started putting it into our tournament rotation, and we ran a single elimination tournament last year, but this year we decided to change things up a little bit and run a round robin tournament. This meant that people got to play their character more than once, got to see it in different matchups, and then actually get comfortable and use a new character if they were trying it for the first time. It was awesome to see, for example, my wife Ariana actually joined the tournament and she played as the Velociraptors from the Jurassic Park expansion. And in her first game, she was a little frustrated with her fighters, but as she kept playing, she started to understand the flow, the strategy, and was crushing people by the end of it. It was awesome to see that. And I think that this round robin format makes sense, getting to use your characters in different matchups, and that way you don't lose out on the whole tournament based on a single bad matchup. Now, the character that did end up winning was actually one of the newer characters from the Marvel Unmatched series, and this is For King and Country. I'll give you a chance to guess who you think it might be here, but this was the Black Widow character who ended up winning the whole thing. So Black Widow is a character that uses these schemes that are missions, and you can play them in order to resolve a super powerful effect. It was awesome. So these super powerful effects, though, in addition to having some criteria that you must complete to actually use the effects, they fetch you a new mission from your deck. So it's a continuous chain of playing these schemes in order to trigger special abilities and then searching for a new one and trying to satisfy that condition. You also have some cards from Maria Hill that allow you to reshuffle these schemes back into your deck. So it's important to keep your ally alive to make sure you're keeping this cycle going. It was a pretty cool concept in general and super powerful character. One of the new ones, this is the Black Widow character for King and Country. Second place was Sasquatch, one of the older characters, still super strong with just those heavy hitting attacks. Our second tournament that we ran was the Crokinole Tournament, and I prepared for this one by making sure that we had several boards, and that way we had multiple teams playing at once. So last year, the faulty thing that I did was just had a single Crokinole board. I thought that might be enough and just sort of have the games go throughout the day. But when it comes to running tournaments, I think the best way is to have multiple games going at the same time. So this year, we actually purchased a new Crokinole board for the library. It's a Tracy Gray Rock board, and this one here has these bumpers that super change the game experience, having you be a lot more precise and a little more gentle because of how crazy the momentum shifts when you actually do hit one of those bumpers. It's kind of terrifying, and it was kind of awesome to have this almost terrain for the different Crokinole pieces that you were playing. So what ended up happening was we had two Crokinole boards that were in the library, and then borrowed two from some friends. And each Crokinole board had its own feel, and I thought that was kind of awesome. We had a 2v2 tournament, and this was a single elimination for getting like up to the higher chances, but there was also a losers bracket so that the losing teams would play each other, and so you still got to play. So sort of combining the two concepts from last year and this year with that single elimination, but also a sort of round robin style. These games did take longer, which is why I figured nothing is going to really change between them aside from the players, whereas in something like Unmatched, those characters are really going to define those matchups. So with the Crokinole Tournament, though, you had four different boards that all had their own unique feel, and you randomized. So I randomized the boards for each of the different matchups, and it made for a cool, interesting tournament where you had to adapt sort of on the fly and figure out what boards played, how the different boards played differently. We had one that was borrowed from a friend that had I don't even know how to describe it. The surface and the board, it felt kind of loose, if that makes sense. If you've played Crokinole, it's a flicking game. You're trying to put it into the center, and the board felt different than anything I'd played on before. And that was so interesting because that was the one that our team had started on first. So cool experience having those randomized boards, lots of different people being able to play at the same time. And for this one, we had 8 teams of 2, which was pretty cool. So that was a lot of people playing Crokinole at the same time. And one of my friends, Dee Dee, came in, had like a carrying case for her pieces. It was awesome. It was just so cool to see a lot of people enjoying the same game at the same time. Some people that were brand new to it and enjoying it for the first time, and then others that were clearly seasoned veterans and ready to show off their skills. So that was the Crokinole Tournament as well. So those were our 2 tournaments that we ran, and I was pleased with them in general. I thought they were fantastic. Now let's go ahead and move on to our awards. So for the awards for FrankCon 2023, we created a committee, and this is the Franklin. So it's FrankCon. The Franklins determine who is winning these awards, and this is either our interactions, playing it with other people at the con itself, playing it in our own group of 4 as we're just running through these different games, trying to get our ideas and opinions on them. And the awards are kind of funny because they change from year to year, but we also end up keeping some, and some surprisingly stand the test of time. So our first game award is the strategy game of the year, and this one's pretty straightforward. Which game embodies the greatest strategy experience? And our winner for this one is Age of Innovation. This was a huge hit, and I was surprised at how much everybody else enjoyed it as well. This is a redone version of Terra Mystica where it just turns the modularity up dramatically. You have factions that are now combinations of 2 different characters mixed together. So you have their terrain type as well as the ability of the character themselves. And there's customization throughout the game where you're able to actually gain new abilities that slot into your board, whether it be innovations, which are this new resource that you can spend books on in order to gain special powers for your character, but they're all displayed in the market here. So it is first come, first serve to grab those. In addition, you are not stuck with a special ability on your character for building like your biggest building. You can actually choose and customize that as well. So you're totally have this freedom to craft a character and experience you want from turn 1 because you're thinking about that long-term strategy, but everybody is still racing for these awesome abilities and powers while also putting the victory point conditions into the forefront. If you're unfamiliar with Age of Innovation or the Terra Mystica system, it's a action-based game where you're building out an engine by placing buildings on a communal board. You're trying to be adjacent to other players in order to gain resources and power. Use that power to generate special abilities and victory points. So you have these factions that are all different and unique that do things in different ways, and you're racing in this one in particular to gain new abilities and race up these different tracks, as well as make sure that you're getting the most power and ability through the different victory points. So impressed with Age of Innovation, and my wife is a huge fan of Terra Mystica in general, and she said after the first play that this is her favorite version of Terra Mystica, which is crazy because she bounced off Gaia Project pretty dang hard, whereas I loved it. But I also do think that this is the strongest Terra Mystica game. It's streamlined. The optimization and the customization is there from turn 1, from the initial draft, honestly, and I think it's so different but so familiar, but streamlined and interesting throughout the entire experience. Tense, exciting. This is the best strategy game for sure. And it was a unanimous decision on this one for best strategy game for Age of Innovation. We got a quick question from Monster Motorsports here. What is FrankCon? It's the first I've heard about it. So FrankCon is a local convention that we run here at SideGame LLC. I put out a invite on the channel because we did want to open up to different YouTube viewers as well. And it happens yearly. It's a smaller convention. We run it out of our house right now, actually, just because our numbers are not that high. So it's something that we can do without having to rent out a space. But it's come together, play games from our library, and just enjoy. Share food, participate in tournaments, win prizes. It's a blast. So I think it's a great way to give back to our gaming community and share all of these cool games that we enjoy. It's also a great way to play larger convention games, and you'll see some of those as we go forward. So definitely, if you're interested in, I'll make sure to put that email. The email address is on our business page, so you can definitely inquire about that. But it won't be again until next year. We do it in the summer, generally during the last part of August. So if you are interested, absolutely drop a link, and we'll make sure that you get invited next time. Absolutely. But yes, this one was open to not just the people that I know from Colorado Springs, but just to the general public as well. Next up, we have our next award, and this is the I'm Going to Stab You award. So this last one, I think, went to Rising Sun, but this year it went to Guards of Atlantis 2. So the whole concept behind the I'm Going to Stab You award is giving you the feeling of, I have this power and I can use this power in order to stab you, to take out some aggression, some vengeance. But I think Guards of Atlantis 2 does it in an interesting way because it's coordinated stabbing. And in Guards of Atlantis 2, you are playing a team-based MOBA game where your goal is to either eliminate enough of your opponent's heroes in order to deplete your enemy's total life points, or you're trying to eliminate your opponent's minions and destroy their castle immediately. And you do this through pushing, destroying minions, pushing the lane, leveling up, gaining special powers and abilities. And this has just solidified to me that this is the best 6-player experience. We had two opportunities to play, actually, yeah, two opportunities to play this game during FrankCon. One, we played a 6-player game, and the other, we played it on the reverse side of the map, which has 2 lanes. That was a 10-player game. And so we had multiple games going on of this, and that was pretty sweet because I got to see it at all player counts with people at different skill levels. And I think that 6-player is the way to play Guards of Atlantis 2. The fact that the board is tight, the communication is there, it's not too crazy with the amount of people going on at the same time. But that being said, in the larger player game, that wasn't an issue either. There's a great method that we use where we just say the largest number, 15, 14, 13, 12, when you're trying to figure out who's going to win. And it works super well. People are like, oh, that's me, I'm 13. And that way, no one's ever comparing. You just start going down the line. It helps out with the game flow, and the experience itself is so fascinating, particularly when people actually follow the rules. There's a big rule in this game where communication is limited to the selection process. So every single round, you'll have a hand of 5 cards, and you have to choose one of these cards to play for your action that turn. You can discuss and talk about what cards you're playing, but as soon as you put it down and everyone reveals, you're not allowed to communicate with your team. This stimulates the real-time nature of a MOBA experience, and it also dramatically decreases the downtime, and it dramatically decreases the quarterbacking, which is incredible because it's on your turn. It is up to you to do the best that you can do based on the situation and how you're interpreting it. If you didn't talk to somebody about where you're going to position, that's on you. That's the team play. But maybe you can inference that based on the cards that they've revealed and that they've played. And this can also be a double-edged sword because if you do talk about exactly what you're going to do, the opponents are there. They can hear you. Every single communication you make must be verbal. So the opponents are going to be playing into that. This game is incredible. The abilities, the experience, and the back and forth, the viability of all the win conditions, and the viability of each character. Guards of Atlantis 2 continues to impress. And for the first plays for my brother Jordan and my sister-in-law Jessica, they were blown away by it as well. So much so that they were excited to play it a second time and try out even more characters in that larger map experience. So one of the best, I think the best 6-player game. This is Guards of Atlantis 2. Next up, we have our award for I'm buying a copy of that, and this goes to Paperback Adventures. On a whim, Jordan wanted to know if this was one worth playing, and I had told him multiple times, like, this is one of the best solo games out there. This takes the roguelike deck building genre and merges it with a word building game, and it does it beautifully. And so we sat down, set up a game there's a 2-player mode where you're playing with one deck, and each player has their own sets of items and MacGuffins and fighting a single character, and you're trying to make sure that you're using cards the best you can in tandem with both sets of your abilities. So we sat down, got to playing, and he was hooked. Immediately went online and purchased it as soon as we finished. This game is incredible. It has that effect because it's so approachable. You start playing, and the system is so simple to learn. You take your hand of cards, you make the best word that you can, or the words that you want to make based on the ability of the card that you want on top. You splay it left or right to gain either defense or attack symbols usually, and then you activate the ability on the top. The enemy attacks, it's got some superpower effect, and then you have a bunch of items and special powers that you're gaining and accruing as you play. They're small little effects, but as you're getting them incrementally, they're things that you can remember and understand, and you are going to amass this horde of tools that you can use to eliminate your opponents. It's an easy game to approach, but a hard game to master, and I think that we definitely felt that as we got through like maybe 3 or 4 bosses, and our health was nearly empty. So I love this experience of wanting to do better, wanting to go back into the dungeon, and then being surprised and excited each time that you see an enemy and the vast assortment of different cards, items, abilities that you can get. As mentioned before, this is based off of a roguelike system, so something similar to Slay the Spire. So each time you play, your experience is going to change by just having a single small ability, and I think that shows in this one. So this one, I'm buying a copy of that was Paperback Adventures. Now there's also a quick honorable mention here, and the reason this didn't technically qualify, this is Capital X2 Generations, is because I had 2 copies of this game and I just gave one of the copies away. So Capital X2 Generation remains to be one of the best filler games. I think it's my favorite in this genre of small, tiny card games. And this has you playing blackjack on multiple lanes. So you have these 4 areas that you are either playing into in order to raise everybody's bust value and gain some ability, or playing in front of yourself to gain a certain amount of points. I won't go too much on this one because technically it didn't win the award because because I had a second copy of this and I just gave it to him. So there's multiple editions of this game. You can get the travel size, which is a smaller box, but I end up never using it because I like the big fancy version, which has like metal coins and it has more expansion content, whereas the travel size removed some of the expansion content as well as some of the core content, one of the powers from each that used additional tokens. So it made it so that it didn't fit in that travel box. So I always just use the standard version. So I just gave the other Franklin family one of these boxes. So that's why this didn't qualify. But if you don't have Capital X2 Generations, it's one you need to seek out. This is one of the best games out there. And next up, our next award is the biggest surprise. And we already talked about this already. This is Guards of Atlantis 2. Again, as mentioned before, a little apprehensive about this team-based MOBA experience with the background from the video game genre. But this game definitely shocked and surprised every single person that played it, just how well it worked and how fun it is. And that level up experience as you play. Incredible experience with Guards of Atlantis 2. So I won't go too into depth on this since we did talk about it already. And now we move on to the biggest disappointment. And this one saddens me to say, but it is Captain Sonar. So Captain Sonar is a game that I played a lot while I lived in Hawaii. We had my friend John Hui. He had a game store there that we would have generally around 10 or 12 people a lot of the times. And every so often we just raise up and go, yeah, let's play some Captain Sonar. It was awesome. I really enjoyed my experience with this, but we played 2 games of Captain Sonar at FrankCon. We played 2 8-player games, actually 2 7-player games. Yeah, 2 7-player games of it where we had one of the characters double up on one of the roles. It was one of the easy roles, so not a big deal. But the game itself has you simulating a submarine experience. You have this large divider in between the 2 players, and on each of the players has a sheet that represents a specific role on the submarine. So these roles either have you being the captain who's determining all the movement, where people are going, and you're drawing on your own board to make sure that you're moving around appropriately, figuring out where to shoot your cannons. You can be the first mate, where every time you move, you're going to be able to charge up these different abilities. You have the engineer who's responsible for determining what different abilities are being charged, as well as how to clear up your submarine to make sure that you're erasing specific things so you don't blow up. And then lastly, you have the radio operator who is going to be listening to the other team and trying to figure out where that team is by using this transparency on your own mini map and based on their path and movement, Tron style, where you can't overlap the path that you've gone on. You are trying to figure out where the other team is based on the possibilities and what sort of path they are making. And you have these islands that sort of roll out these different areas that they couldn't be in. So you have some deduction in there. But the reason that this game flopped so hard is the game took an hour and a half to play. And an hour and a half seems fine for like one of these larger strategy games, which is not a big deal. But in a real-time experience, it felt so boring. Like once we got to the 40-minute point or 30-minute point, it felt that we were just turning our wheels and doing the same things. And I think what it has to do with is the balance of both teams, because both teams knew what was going on. We used our abilities basically as soon as we were able to use them most effectively. We were doing like this, there's a ability that you can charge where you get information on the opponent. We were using them at the most opportune times, doubling up on them so we could get some certain accuracy as to where they were. But it got to the point where it was just back and forth of us charging our effects, using our information, using our cannons, and then as soon as the opportunity arose where you could jump out and give confusion, there's a silence action where you can jump a couple of spaces to really mess up with the navigator. And it made it to this point where just no one was getting anything done, and it was super frustrating. What ended up happening is about an hour in, one of the teams started dropping mines and just basically covered the entire bottom half of the map with mimes and then just sat there. They didn't do a single thing and just waited for the other team to come down. Not interactive for that team, not fun for that team, and honestly, not that fun for our team because we knew exactly what was happening because we could hear when they were dropping mines. And it was just a miserable, frustrating experience that just wasn't exciting. I also think that a big thing that this has to do with is the roles that you are given as you play, because I think 2 of the roles are frankly not exciting at all. So you have an engineer role whose job is to cross off the different abilities, and this is what's going to charge up those effects for the first mate. And those abilities are based on the directions that your sub move. So if you were to move north, you cross off one of your boxes on north. But you have to make sure that you're going like east because they're all connected based on colors. And if you can cross off all the colors, you erase them all. what this turns up being is just a going through the motions movement. You're not making any big decisions. You're just stating the facts, and the captain is making the decisions. So the engineer doesn't really actually have a cool or interesting job. It's just one that needs to be done, which isn't exciting. And then on top of that, you have the first mate who is charging effects based on the engineer's moves, and they fall under a similar path where you're just doing the job that you need to do. If you cross off a green, then, well, you have one of two green options to pick. So you better pick the one that usually use them at the same time. So you just pick one of them until it gets filled up. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. And then same thing with the mine and the torpedo. These are like the weapons that you can launch. And it's a similar thing where if you charge up those, then if you think you are close, you charge up the torpedo. If you think that you are not, you charge up the mine. So it's like it's a no decision point, and it's pretty frustrating. And there's also moments in the game where you have to pause and stop your progress, and it completely throws off the entire cadence of the whole thing. And I think that's definitely the point of this submerged mechanic, where once your board gets too full, you might get into impossible situations where you can't move. And so that's when you surface, you come up to the surface, and you're able to erase some of these lines that made it impossible for you to move. And then you go back down. But during that time, the opponent is still doing their thing. So you've lost track, unless your person who's listening to the radio is listening intently there, which is definitely a hard thing to do. A lot of pressure on that person to make sure that you stay viable. And then when you get back on the ocean, you just start the same process of moving, charging, and using that same cyclical procedure. So I'm pretty frustrated about this one in general. I don't know what the biggest fixes for this could be. Yeah, if you have any suggestions on how to make this one just a more interesting experience, can you play this by removing certain roles? Because frankly, playing that role of just crossing the same thing, it just got so monotonous and boring. I really dislike this one. So that is Captain Sonar. I think, lastly, I think the biggest reason that maybe we enjoyed it at the other place was the discrepancy in skill levels. I think that if one team is just better and more efficient at doing this process, they are going to be able to more quickly move around, more quickly find the other players, and that's going to lead them to having a better time. So that discrepancy of strength of the players is huge. But since there was no discrepancy here, everybody was doing what they needed to do at the best of their ability, then it made the game just last way too long. So not a big fan of this one, and we're pretty disappointed in the entire experience. That's our biggest disappointment. That's Captain Sonar. The next award is hilarious because this came as a response to Living Forest's Spiel des Jahres nomination last year. This is the Not Better Than Dune Imperium award. So last year it was won by Living Forest because we were just so surprised that it happened, that Living Forest ended up winning the Spiel des Jahres. And well, Dune Imperium had the same core deck building mechanism, but Dune Imperium, I think, if I remember correctly, Dune Imperium was nominated as well and didn't win, which is insane to me. That being said, the most popular criticism here of, not criticism, but most popular comparison for Dune are games in a similar genre where it's a deck building worker placement game. These are things like Endless Winter, Lost Ruins of Arnak, and that is exactly what came up this time was Lost Ruins of Arnak, getting the Not Better Than Dune Imperium award. So the biggest way that I can describe Lost Ruins of Arnak is it's a fun experience. This is one, and I enjoy this game. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. I still like this game a lot. So when you play Lost Ruins of Arnak, you have a character that has their own deck. If you're playing with the expansion, that has special abilities and powers, your own effect, and every single turn you're doing small incremental things, which is a system I enjoy because it keeps the pacing of the game pretty dang strong. You're either gaining a resource, you are using an effect of a card, or you're buying new cards for the deck, or exploring a new area, getting new resources, moving up tracks. And those are the things that you're doing one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, and it's a race to some of these more high priority action spaces. Whereas in Dune Imperium, the strongest thing from this game is the impact of those decisions and just how important each decision is. If you send a worker to a place, you are considering the space, you are considering the card that you're playing, you're considering the impact of the action. If you can send characters into the center to actually to make sure that you're getting involved in the combat. And I love that every single action that you take in Dune is critical. There's no the order is important. There's no real way to how do I describe it? It's like in Arnak, I feel like I'm just doing a bunch of small things, but in Dune, I feel that every single decision matters, and each one could cost me the game, or each one could put me in a position where I'm so strong or far ahead. But there's always this push your luck and intrigue based on the actions that I'm taking, because I have to consider every other player at the table. And I love that feeling. I love being able to win a combat with just a single unit. I love holding cards in my hand secretly for a reveal at the end of the round. I like dropping out early to make sure that I can snag a card that I think is so important that it's worth forgiving an action for. I think that the intrigue cards are scary and terrifying. The bluffing aspect, the special abilities that are tied to your characters that have immediate impacts. I love how interesting each card is, the restrictions on the card, the importance of the deck building. It makes Dune Imperium one that stands out and I think is a superior game for sure. I still enjoy Lost Ruins of Arnak. I like the theme a lot. I love the characters. I like the special abilities of the expedition leaders in particular, as they allow you to look at those different facets. But I think that the impactfulness is missing from this one. And I think that the people, when we played this, we felt that. My wife and I felt this. My brother felt this. And wow, I think that this is still a fun game, but I think that there is no standing to that tension and the interaction that Dune Imperium has. We've got some comments from Monster Motorsports here. Definitely a fan of Lost Ruins of Arnak. Loving Arnak. Figuring out that research track puzzle is always a great experience. And I do enjoy that. I like that there's a sequence that you want to make sure that you're taking, and you're trying to figure out how you can eke out the different resources to climb up this resource track. It's a satisfying experience, especially when you're able to get there first and get that little extra bonus, whether it be like a compass or a tablet or something like that. It does feel great. And then follows up with, I love Dune Imperium as well. In our group, Dune is for more crunchy experienced players, while Arnak is best for my family or newer gamers, or my brain can't handle crunchy at the moment. I think that makes a lot of sense, where this one, when you play Arnak, you're just in for a chill time. You're taking things, you're getting abilities from cards, you're just sort of doing things. And all of these things will be good. There is definitely a best order to do these, but it's not as intense or high stress as Dune. And I think that's what I like in games. I like feeling that stress in this controlled environment, because it makes for extremely memorable situations and experiences. Whereas I don't think Lost Ruins of Arnak has that. I don't think I have huge memorable moments from my games of Lost Ruins of Arnak. I just remember enjoying the experience. So I don't have those highs or those lows that I do in something like Dune. So still enjoy Lost Ruins of Arnak, but it is the winner this year of the Not Better Than Dune Imperium Award. And next up is our Colorado Award. So this is an award that we give to a game that embodies Colorado. And last year, I'm trying to remember what we gave to last year. I think it was Unmatched last year, because it was just a blast playing a bunch of it, and it was something that just continuously came out. This year, our Colorado Award goes to Blood on the Clock Tower. So Blood on the Clock Tower is a huge social deduction game where the thrill of it is that it's a it has a heavy emphasis on the deduction portion of social deduction. Each player is going to be using special powers and abilities to suss out the evil team and the good team and try to make their way to their victory condition. If you're the demon, you want to make sure that everyone but you and another player dies. And if you are on the good team, you got to make sure that demon dies. The coolest thing about this is that the storyteller is going to be a huge facet of the game. And when we play this, I generally will storytell. It is a service that we give for SideGame LLC. And this is a way that the game can simulate and be something that is different than any other social deduction game. There are several mechanisms that rely on storyteller decisions, storyteller input, giving information that is incorrect, and that's all controlled with reminder tokens, abilities, modifiers, trackers. And the way that it's done with the Grimoire here, this book that holds all this information, is brilliant. I think it's the best system for this DM style, which makes it still intriguing, challenging, interesting, and fun for the storyteller. It's a experience where you're trying to make sure you're keeping the teams as balanced as possible while making the most interesting game. Now, this year, I wanted to give a big shout out to No Rolls Bard. They put out a video a while ago. This was for a script competition. They do some amazing Blood on the Clock Tower content. So if you have not seen that, please go check them out. I'll leave a link in the description of the video. But No Rolls Bard put out a script competition a while ago. And one of the scripts that won was the No Rolls Bard script. And this is a script that I ran 2 times during FrankCon. We had 2 games of it. 2 games? Yeah, 2 games of it. And this introduces several characters that have abilities, can gain abilities, can change alignments, but also do it in a way that is deducible, is trackable. It doesn't feel extremely random, but it feels logical and something that you can piece together. Starting off with the townsfolk, you have some really unique effects, like the alchemists that can give you abilities of minions, bounty hunters, which allow you to no evil players, but make it so the evil team's a bit stronger. You have the gossip who can get verified correct information at the cost of extra kills. And then two characters that had a awesome time, the huntsman and the poppy grower. The huntsman is going to be doing their own little hunt game where they're trying to find the damsel, which is a instant win condition for the evil team, and then also the poppy grower, which turns off the knowledge of all of the evil players. So generally the evil players will know who they are, but if there's a poppy grower in the game, it turns off that effect, and so they no longer know their evil team. It's so scary, unless they can get the poppy grower killed somehow if they figure out who they are. And to balance this side, you have some crazy evil team members. Now, if quickly the damsel, this is that panic button that the minions have. If the minions know that the damsel's in play, and if they can figure out who the damsel is, that's an instant win condition. But if the huntsman can figure out first, they turn the damsel into somebody else, into another townsfolk character. So it's a reward for being able to figure this out. So pretty dang awesome. And then the minions are crazy. We have the poisoner, who's going to be ruining abilities and special information. You have Godfather, who gets to know what sort of outsiders are in play and gets extra kills for it. The fearmonger, who has their own mini game, who's trying to identify and kill a single person every single day, but everybody knows they're in the game because it's publicly announced. The goblin and the boom dandy, who want to die. The goblin, you just auto win. If you can claim that you're the goblin, you end up dying. And then the boom dandy, if they're destroyed, if they're killed, they blow up everybody but 3 players, and then one final vote occurs in a single minute. And then lastly, the demons are so fascinating because they change the way that you play. You have the Vortox, who turns all of the information incorrect and encourages death. Otherwise, it's an instant win for the evil team. You have the Legion, who makes it so that more than half the players are going to be on the evil side this time. And then lastly, the little monster, who is the demon, is a little baby token and replaces the demon with a minion. And you pass around the baby to the evil team, or sometimes the good team, in order to keep it alive. So you're trying to keep the shade off of certain portions of your evil team. So in the games that I ran of this, we ran 2 little monster games. So I did a double of the same demon back to back to just make it so they weren't sure. They were going to have a little bit more trouble narrowing it down on which of the minions that they were playing against. And the experience we had with the good team win in the first round, and then the evil team win in the second round. In the second one, we had the good team had a poppy grower, and even with that, the evil team was able to figure it out who their good team was based on the amnesiac. So we had a bounty hunter in the game, which knew a bunch of the evils and was able to figure out 2 unique names. And the amnesiac was the person that I turned evil, and the evil player knew their effect was they could figure out who was on their team. So they figured it out pretty quickly, who was actually on their team, and were able to strengthen their claims. They actually won with a goblin victory, which was kind of wild. And there was a poisoner on the good teams. They were able to, for a while, control the minions' effects on who they were able to suss out, and using it to make sure that their executions went off pretty clean. It was a pretty awesome experience. And then in our first game, the good team won, and it was a super lucky hit with the huntsman finding the damsel on the first turn. It was wild. They were able to figure it out so quickly. It was awesome. And this was totally on them, and then the information they were giving out. Overall, I think the script is incredible. I think Blood on the Clock Tower still remains to be just one of the best games ever. This is still my number 2 favorite game of all time, and I enjoy storytelling it just as much as I love playing it. And gosh, what a great group of people to play with. So that was the No Rules Barred script, our Colorado Award that goes to Blood on the Clock Tower. Next up is our Game of the Con. So this was actually a tie. So for our Game of the Con, we generally will just do a vote with the 4 Franklins that are part of the committee. And this time we had a 2-way split. Our first game was Wonderland's War. So Wonderland's War continues to impress. It's great at every player count from 2 to 5, and the tension that comes from the fighting. It does the thing that I love in games where you are going to spend a phase to get abilities and powers, and then you immediately use those abilities and powers, and you use them in combat-centric ways. So this game it's a combat-focused game. You are trying to gain abilities and then participate in combats because you get special effects and powers for doing so. You're going to be able to trigger abilities that give you points, let you build buildings, upgrade your effects, give you the ways to satisfy quests. And then you also get opportunities to do the same thing when you're not participating in battle. So sometimes it's good to sit on the sidelines in order to generate more resources to use in your own battles. Timing is important. Knowing when to push your luck is important. And because that drafting phase at the beginning where you're getting your abilities and powers is so open, there's a lot of open information, you always have a choice on how and what path you want to go down. The experience is one of the best. I love the theme. I think that the gameplay is solid, and it's got a flow that just just keeps you engaged and you're always excited to try this one. I'm looking forward to the expansion that will be out soon. And yeah, Wonderland's War remains to be one of the best games out there. Next up is our second tie, and we already talked about this earlier. This is Age of Innovation. So this received 2 of the votes as well. So Age of Innovation, I won't go into detail, but amazing game. If you have not played, get this one. It is the best of the Terra Mystica series. And then we go on to the biggest disappointments. These are the bottom of the con, starting off with Captain Sonar. We already talked about this, and this was actually a split, which is crazy to me. Captain Sonar received half of the votes, and then the other half of the votes went to John Company 2nd Edition, which is wild because I enjoyed the play that we had of John Company 2nd Edition. So if you're unfamiliar with this one, this is a game where you play as members of the East India Trading Company, and it's up to you to make sure that the company survives and thrives, but you are also making as much money as possible while this is happening. And the gameplay is super long. The game is hecka crunchy. Like, this is one of the most complicated games we've ever played. And it's got this flow that just has all of these small little things that happen. So it's a bit hard to follow and understand the impact of your actions. Now, the best way to teach this, in my opinion, is to teach it as a super complex party game, because that's sort of what it is. Because there's you don't really have a lot of control as to what's going on, because there's a lot of randomness that goes on in the game. So that's the way that I approach it and the way that I teach it, because if you sat down and taught the 60-page rulebook to somebody, they would not understand a dang thing. You have to see it in practice to understand what's going on, which does mean it's going to burn people for a couple of times if they haven't experienced it or haven't played it. And there will be a lot of rule looking up usually, and just because of all of these small little things and interactions that can show up. So I enjoyed my play of this. I thought that it was a lot of fun. I lost dramatically. There was a moment where I embezzled half of the company funds with one of my event cards, which was amazing. So I had an extra $15. But then because of that, the company absolutely tanked. So I made the company fail. So I thought that it would do more damage to the others than to me, but I ended up losing my my retirement. So there's the way that you get points mainly is you have your characters retire, and based on where they retire, you have to pay an upkeep cost. Otherwise, they're thrown out of the retirement homes. So after a really poor round of trade, I didn't receive any money during there's this operations phase in India where you go in and you sell different goods, and based on how many goods you sell, the people who are actually doing the selling get a couple of extra dollars. So all I needed was a single dollar, but nobody was going to help me because I had tanked the company so much, and that ended up making it so that I lost all of my victory points in a single round just because of some poor dice rolls. Oh my gosh, it sucks so much, but it was funny, it was thematic, it was hilarious, and it just happens, and that's something you got to be okay with in this game. The people who voted against this didn't enjoy the fact that it just felt like not a lot was happening, and then when they had the opportunities for things to happen, they would lose their positions in office, because there's a mechanism in this game where in order to get to retirement, you have to roll a die at the start of each round for each of your characters in office, and if you roll a 5 or a 6, they retire, and there's nothing you can do about it. They leave, and then you put them in one of the retirement areas. And so you want to do this because that's points, but if you are doing this, you're giving up your opportunities and your actions and your actual impact on the board. And my wife was playing, and she lost every single office at the start of every single round, which is, it's sort of mind-blowing, the fact that that can happen, and just had no say and no control of what was actually going on, which is pretty frustrating. And of course, she's going to get victory points and get things. She ended up winning, actually, which is crazy, but didn't actually have a lot of control of what was going on and the actions in the game, just sort of passively watching this system play in front of her. One second, my dog is freaking out. There you go, buddy. All right. So I think that's the biggest reason here, is just this lack of agency and the lots of players getting control instead of you, and not in a way that you can totally influence. Yes, there's negotiation. Yes, there's trade. But ultimately, if you're not in offices, you don't have a lot of power to actually do things. They do try to mitigate this by using cards that allow you to trade favors in the future, and they're like binding trades. You actually have a card that you can cash in for this, which I love. I think it's a great experience. And as mentioned before, I do enjoy this game, but the other players at the table, not a big fan of it. It felt like it was just a slog to get through. But that is our second bottom of the con. That is John company. And that's it. Those are all of the games that we wanted to give awards to here at FrankCon 2023. I'll give a quick list of the games that were checked out from the library during FrankCon, starting off with, so we have 36 different titles that were checked out. And this is Too Many Bones, Crokinole, Clever Cubed, Wonderland's War, Lost Ruins of Varnak, Unmatched, Mysterium, Age of Innovation, Junk Art, Challengers, Guards of Atlantis 2, Monster My Neighbor, Shadow Hunters, John Company, Yinch Mandala, Captain Sonar, Pax Pamir 2nd Edition, Poetry for Neanderthals, Spicy, Mask Men, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, Cinder, Quirky Circuits, Oranienburg Canal, Mechs vs. Minions, Capital X 2 Generations, Blood on the Clock Tower, The Yawning Portal, Trogdor for Sale, The Quacks of Quedlinburg, Paperback Adventures, Blood Bowl Team Manager, Ascension Tactics, and Star Wars Rebellion. I'm curious to hear what you think about these games that I talked about here, which games were deserving of the awards that they received, and which games you think we maybe have been a bit too harsh on, or maybe had got shorted based on those games that we just discussed in that list there. What do you think about FrankCon? Is this a convention that you'd like to join in the future? If you are nearby the Colorado Springs area, just drop us a line. Our business email is on the channel, and you can let us know if you have an interest, and we'll send you the information. As mentioned before, this was a free event. You could come in and just enjoy, play games from our library, meet the SideGame LLC staff, enjoy some games, and we're looking forward to making this bigger and better every single year. And already, I think splitting it into 2 different days this year was definitely the way to go, as well as having the multiple boards, multiple unmatched games happening at the same time. I think that our tournaments just ran exceptionally well, and I'm looking forward to more. I think that FrankCon was an absolute success, and I just want to do more of it. I think that FrankCon was awesome. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. Let me know what you think again about the games, about FrankCon in general, and if this is something that you'd be interested in, or just in general, what you'd like to share about this experience as a whole. But thank you so much for watching. SideGame Strong, y'all.